Welcome to the Movie-Club Emporium. I've completely slid down in this chair. This is our June Hangout. And we're going to be talking about the 28 Days Later franchise.
Yes.
Which we have a weird... We'll get into that here in a moment. We have a weird... the words escape me, but... history.
We have a history with this movie.
And
going back over 20 years.
And so the idea of it being a franchise is still very wild to me. But it very much is, so that's what we were going to dig into. But first and foremost, how's everybody doing? Nick, how are you doing?
I'm alright. It's been a busy month since I was last on here. A lot going on at work and at home, so things finally seem to be evening out and slowing down a bit, which is nice. But, yeah. I had a pretty good day. I went out and did thrift store shopping and got some Thai food, so, with the wife. So it was a good day, and here I am to talk about this series with you, and it's still wild to think about that this is the series. And when we first saw this way back the day, I never thought this would be a series. But here we are, especially over 20. Because the original came out, and 28 Days Later came out in 2002, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Was it shown stateside in 2002, or wasn't until 2003?
I want to say maybe it was 2002 for us. Because I know it definitely, and we'll get into its kind of influence. Because I always think of the theatrical experience. It came out before Dawn, the remake of Dawn, which was 04. I want to say this was 02, because 02 would have made me a sophomore, and that feels right.
According to so it came out in 2002, but according to the internet, it was released in late June 2003, which seems to line up a little bit more with kind of my memory of us going to see it over in Lawton. You know, you would have been heading into your senior year. I just graduated, and we'll get into the memory of that, but
yeah,
because I thought that was the case that it got released overseas, but there was something of a delay for us to get it over here.
Which is weird to think about now, but yeah, it's weird how that happens. But first and foremost, I guess, before we get into the deep dive into this franchise, welcome. If this is your first time here. Nick and I do this every single month. Last month, we had a lot of fun talking about some wild and weird movies within the subgenre of 90s virtual reality films. A whole lot of fun talking about that. And this month, of course, we're doing this. Next month, I'll just go ahead and sell it because I am super excited for next month. Next month, we are not only going to be reviewing the new James Gunn Superman, but we're also going to give our own individual rankings of the live-action Superman films. So you're going to miss that. And if you say to yourself, well, that's all well and good, Jason, but I need more. Well, you're in luck because every Sunday... every week a new review goes up, a new video goes up on our YouTube channel, YouTube at the Movie-Club Emporium. The last couple weeks, like you said, it's been a very busy and weird month as well. So the last 2 months have actually kind of been fun. They've been what we're calling our Movie Club Archive. So we started this goodness, now going on 3, 4 years ago is when we kind of kicked it
I was,
back.
I was trying to remember that. It has been a little over 3 years ago.
Okay.
Or right, about 3 years ago and some change, we started doing this together.
Yeah, and we were doing them over on Facebook. And now that Facebook is removing live videos, we have collected all of our old live streams and have kind of cut them down, cut them to maybe cut out some of our Facebook specific stuff on it, but added new our current intros and stuff like that. But those are going up as live stream videos uh, over on our YouTube channel. So really cool live videos that Nick and I did ages ago, where we talk about underrated '90s thrillers or our top Nick Cage movies. Things like that. Those are all going to pop up here and there on the Movie Club archive. But yeah, that or we got reviews coming up. I actually got done just now filming a review before we went live because that part of the computer at least was working. Um, that will go up not this week. This week, you're in for a treat because I'm going to just put up when we get to reviewing 28 weeks later, which Nick and I have not discussed at all. That review will actually go up this Sunday, and the next Sunday will be a new review for a new film that, ironically, again, as a U kind of came out overseas and is just now kind of making its way here. But again, like I said, it's all fun and games over there every single week. And what's even more exciting is we're pushing for some of you to help us share, like you do all the important algorithm things, like and share, subscribe, because we are just a handful of subscribers away from being able to dual stream on here as well as YouTube. So if maybe you're not, as this is going up, if you're not a huge fan of this platform, well, help us get us onto YouTube where you can watch everything, which will still, all this stuff still goes up there. Just you'll be able to watch it a lot faster if we're able to dual stream on YouTube than you are as when I'm sitting and not going to be able to go to sleep at 3 in the morning and go, oh crap, you know that live we did 3 months ago? I should put that up. But yeah, that's gonna do all the normal, all the housekeeping parts of the live. So uh, let's get into this franchise. Such a weird thing to say, but we're diving into the 28 later averse. And so, yeah, do you want to start with kind of where we are with our history with this film, Nick?
Yes. Back in time to 2002, when we were teenagers in high school, I started hearing rumblings on the internet and in various horror magazines and whatnot about a new kind of zombie movie, quote unquote, that was going to be released, and it had a pretty good amount of hype behind it. You know, this UK zombie movie done by this guy named Danny Boyle, who's pretty well established at that point, and there was a lot of excitement around it. It wasn't super high budget. The way it was shot and its take on the infected, cannibal ghoul genre looked to be very appealing. So, well before we were able to see it, I was I was excited for it. I was all on board. Uh, I've been a fan of zombie movies my whole life, but when I was in high school, it was far and away my favorite genre. So, and at that point, we hadn't been as inundated with zombie movies as we would later get in the 2000s, where we were getting them absolutely nonstop. Uh, but it dropped in the UK in 2002 to fantastic reviews, rave reviews. which further piqued my interest given the fact that it's not exactly the kind of movie that'd be like a critical darling or to get kind of widespread acclaim. So not only was there going to be a mainstream release, quote unquote, zombie movie, I'm gonna call it a zombie movie. That's the point is argued on whether or not I would say it's at least zombie adjacent. So I'm gonna refer to it as that. My personal opinion. But of course, in those days, the simultaneous releases weren't really a thing yet. Um, so we had to wait and wait and wait. Well, 2003 comes around. It's summer. I've just graduated high school. Jason's heading into his senior year, and we get word it's releasing in the States. Well, it didn't get the most widespread release. The town we usually went to go see movies was Altus, which is about a half-hour drive away, and there was no word on 28 days later getting released there. So one night on a Sunday, we decided to drive a little farther to the town of city of Lawton. I remember, I believe you and we were in your pickup. We went, I think, didn't we go to church in Snyder, if I remember correctly?
I think so. I think
I
so.
think we did. And then afterwards, we hopped in and drove to Lawton and saw a later showing of it. Um, that experience in that day is one of my fondest movie watching memories, especially in going to a theater. We were both so massively hyped for this movie. And going there and sitting in the movie theater late at night, and we were both completely blown away by this movie. We were at a loss for words leaving the theater afterwards, and we talked about it ad nauseum on the hour plus drive home. Um, I think we both recognized at that point it's like it it was a very significant moment in horror cinema, and they had done such a great job with this kind of movie, and one that has gone on in the years since to be extremely influential. So, you have any memories before we get deep into the movie from that whole experience or the anticipation going up to it?
Yeah, because like you said, zombies weren't. I mean, they were around, but this was before. I can't even remember the last one that had been in theaters. I mean, at the time is when we were in high school, so we were discovering, the Dead movie, Romero's Dead trilogy, and it was even before, finding things like the Italian zombie movies. Although we had rented, it's not also known as it Nightmare City, but it's also the Gates of
Yes,
Hell.
yes,
Um,
Fulci zombie movie.
yeah, which is probably not if you're gonna get into Fulci, not the one you want to start your Fulci zombie movie experience with. And then what was
No,
Flesh Eat? What was it Flesh Eaters? What was the one that
it
had
was
that
it was Flesh Eater slash Revenge of the Living
Revenge of
Zombies,
the Living
which is
Zombies?
a really extremely low rent Night of the Living Dead ripoff. That's absolutely chock full of nudity, and this from the late '80s, early '90s. And its big claim to fame was having the same actor who played the first zombie you see in Night of the Living Dead, and that's it's one of those. It's fun to think back and talk about that movie, but it is such a it's a B movie to its core. So I mean, at that point, outside of the Dead trilogy,
The
what did we really see that was truly quality? I mean, Return of the Living Dead, of course,
yeah, pretty
which
much.
which showed us which kicked into gear the whole fast zombie craze, and and Return of the Living Dead. I believe I don't know if we had watched two or three yet, but the original Return of the Living Dead, which is a fantastic movie. We should cover that series at some point.
I think
Um,
we had seen the third one because I think it was you who bought it for me for my birthday one year.
that might be the case.
We because I
But in
no
terms,
I did not see the second one until as an adult, but I remember the first one and I remember the third one.
uh, both of which, in my opinion, are very much worth watching. And looking what else to say, I think we may have seen Dead Alive.
Yeah,
Um,
Reanimator we'd seen Reanimator.
yes, Night of the Living Dead, uh, the 1990 version. We've seen it at that point, but then Night of the Living Dead 1990, there just hadn't really been much. You had Night of the Living Dead 90, Return of the Living Dead 3, and there were other movies out that contained zombies, but weren't really what you think of as just like a strictly a zombie movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I just remember because Altus was the go to. We always went to Altus. It was just easier. Everything was right there. Plus, Lawton was such a. It was so Lawton. Um, and that was the first exposure to like there's a movie theater in the mall. That's insane. And I think we only ended up seeing like 3 movies there that I no 4 movies there that I can remember.
so 28 days later, Fear.com,
The Dawn of the Dead, '04,
yes,
and then Return of the King.
yes, those are the big ones I remember because I mean, we were young, we were poor, so driving twice as far to go to Lawton just wasn't as appealing if we could go to Altus. But when it called for it, we would
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, and I
Which was
get like
great because it was definitely a nicer theater than Altus.
that's true. Yeah, but yeah, just I can remember going and then watching it and just being just like you said, just blown away by it, by every aspect of it, which we'll get into, like the cinematography, the music, the story, the acting. Like it was just really like, and then now seeing some of its influences, but at the time not having seen anything really like it, um, really blew me away. Um, and the way and just kind of the way it's shot, which is so funny. Just to get to the physical media aspect of it real quick before we dive into the movie is this I have like the 2-pack, which is like up until still kind of the holy grail because it never got anything besides that. Now they're supposedly releasing them in 4K. This movie doesn't need to be in 4K. It's barely needs
Yes.
to be on Blu-ray. There's the scene where they're driving. You see all the pretty flowers, like that one scene with like all the different colored tulips. It almost looks like animation because they've cleaned up the film so much. But yeah, no, just I remember watching it and just being completely overtaken with how incredible it was, and then kind of yeah, like you said, like being on the forefront of like the explosion of the zombie movies. I have my thoughts on this franchise as a whole, where as it pertains to zombies slash infected, but we'll get into that as we go on. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at before we getting into the actual movie itself. Was just it being. I don't like. I mean, the term is goofy, but I don't want to say religious experience, but it was just. It's a memory. It's a theater going experience that all what now almost despite what they call the newest movie, not quite 28 years later, um,
Yes.
it's still very like I can remember like the thoughts and feelings of us leaving that theater and that drive home.
It was very treasured memory of us, and our in those formative years of watching movies. And here we are, 22 years after that, and still hanging out watching movies and talking about them. So, would you like to break down the synopsis, the plot of this movie?
Absolutely. So, 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle, coming off, and this even if you look at Danny Boyle's filmography, this is a weird spot in it because he was kind of known for movies like Train Spotting and the beach and then later going to do Slumdog Millionaire. But it's written by Alex
Sunshine.
and Sunshine. We're gonna get to Sunshine. Written by Alex Garland, who honestly right now is probably my favorite filmmaker active right now. Written by him, starring Cillian Murphy, a very young unknown to us Americans. Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, Brendan Gleeson, and despite the hot take it might add, especially if Amber's still in the chat, my favorite Doctor Who, Christopher Eccleston. And so the movie follows Jim, played by Murphy. He's just a normal London bike carrier. He's in a car accident, and he wakes up 28 days after his accident to discover that all of England, but for sure we are mostly in the city of London at the beginning, is ravaged by this deadly rage virus that basically turns people into zombie-like creatures because it passes through by blood and saliva. But instead of wanting to just eat you, it's just a murderous rampage, like nonstop murder spree.
Adrenaline fueled, bloodthirsty ghoul.
Yeah, and he has to not only find a way to deal with the fact that he's fresh out of a coma, but that the world has essentially ended, and now he is in this post-apocalyptic event, and the characters and the friends and the enemies that you meet along the way. Because if whether you just believe this is a zombie movie or not, it does rely on the tropes that of most zombie films, that not all 90% of the time zombies aren't your biggest threat. It's your fellow man.
People are the real monsters.
Again, going back to the idea of this movie being in 4K, I love how, I don't want to say gross, but how low tech this movie looks. You know, shooting it on the I don't know if you know if it's high 8 or just like mini. It looks like it was shot on the video cassettes, like the mini DV tapes we used to use.
I think it was shot on mini DV, if I'm not mistaken.
I love the look of it. It gives it this, especially and with the way modern cameras look, it gives the whole movie this weird like security camera look to the film, especially when it cuts to like different it cuts to like security cameras sometimes, but it just has this real lo-fi look to it that works so much for the story. It's akin to, you know, something like watching perhaps like Texas Chainsaw or Last House on the Left on like a ratty VHS. Like watching it in a higher format takes away from that movie. Whereas in this movie, just the look of it really is its own character in the film. And the fact that they were able to do this movie for super cheap, to get the shots that they get with downtown deserted London, when you hear what all they had to go through to get that stuff, is incredible. And it's so interesting to watch now, especially as we get into the later films. And honestly, what this movie kicks off with the zombie genre is because this movie feels very episodic. It almost feels like there are kind of three movies in one. You have the first movie of You know, very, you know, last man on earth dealing with this zombie outbreak. Cut to the middle of the movie, which very much is kind of like this road trip family, um, on the road movie, and then you get to the third movie, which is this breakdown of the government, breakdown of morality type of almost almost kind of borderline teeters on like a rape revenge type feeling to it. It's just such a weird but interesting. Like it dives into so many different things, but it all weaves well. Um I love the music in the movie. I love the opening of it. How you're just kind of immediately in the middle of this horrific footage. Um, like it's just a scene out of Clockwork Orange, only we're doing it to chimps. And I'll stop because I'll have more to say later. But it's just again, it's something that now, having seen more movies, you can see the influences of this movie. It's the crazies. It's Dawn of the Dead '78 a little bit. But what this movie does that then inspires so much of what we've seen in every zombie movie since this come out, and even not just in movies, but um, you can't help but see the parallels of this movie and the story of Jim with both the comics and the television adaptation of The Walking Dead. Like, this movie is kind of like this weird pinnacle of a subgenre, which is just fascinating to dig into. But I will stop and let you kind of pick up from there.
It's it's hard to overstate the impact that had, and for enough, reading the Walking Dead comics later on in the 2000s, with the character of Rick waking up from a coma into this very, when he was initially injured and put into a coma, the world is normal. Then he wakes up and everything he's known has changed. He doesn't know where his family is, and he's bloodthirsty ghouls are trying to attack him instantly while he's still stumbling around in a hospital gown. 28 days later is what we have to thank for that, because it is such a terrifying, disorienting situation to think about. Of things are normal, and all of a sudden, coming as someone, I've not been in a coma, but I don't know, something abruptly happened to me. Then things were moving along. Then all of a sudden, I woke up in a hospital, and things were very disorienting. Uh, or your cat's hanging out behind you, and it's funny. He's just settling in so well.
Um,
Anywho, thank you, Patrick, for making an appearance. Uh, um, but not only waking up from a coma, which is disorienting enough, waking up from a coma into a shattered world where people who are infected with a virus are actively trying to kill you, and you have no idea or context for what's going on. That it is brilliant, and it is so terrifying. He's going along. He goes to a church, and it's just full of dead bodies. And all of a sudden, this priest with blood coming out of his eyes tries to attack him, and he's just running along, and he runs, and he's, you know, with atrophied muscles in a hospital gown, being chased by sprinting, all these sprinting people, just blood pouring out of him, trying to hurt him. Um, and luckily enough, he runs into the Molotov cocktail wielding survivors. This movie doesn't really give you a lot of room to breathe at the beginning. At the very beginning, you have the scene of the animal rights activist breaking into the lab and kicking out the whole event with the chimps that are infected, who tear them apart and what spark off this infection. And you don't get to see any of what happens between that initial getting out of that lab and what had happened with Jim. It's just talked about. And I think that is done to tremendous effect because you have some of the survivors relaying some of the horrifying stories of the things they've endured since. And I think it makes it much more effective than if they try to have flashback scenes where it's showing these events going down. I think it's so in keeping with the low resolution, lo-fi version of the movie. And it's just, it makes it much more terrifying. Like the story one of the survivors told earlier on in the movie about being at the airport and there being crowds of people and looking down and he's standing on people because they're so packed in there. And then the infection getting loose in there and spreading like wildfire. Um, and this is such a terrifying take on disease spreading and infection spreading, a zombie virus spread, anything like that, because of how rapidly it happens. The infected are so aggressive, and they're so single-minded in their pursuit to maul other people and spread this infection or puke blood into them, which is horrifying to further the spread of this virus. But it's not, and a lot of other takes of movies that are, where they're spreading some sort of sickness through physical contact. There's a delayed onset of it. You're attacked by zombies, you get bitten, it might be hours or a day or two later, and then you turn, but you have some warning. Here, you have less than 60 seconds, sometimes quite a bit less. You go from normal person to bloodthirsty ghoul, instantly getting up and sprinting, trying to affect somebody else. Uh, and it makes it really easy to understand how this, especially in a place like the UK, which is fairly densely populated, how it would get out of control so incredibly quickly, and things would go fast, would go bad so fast, to the point, less than a month afterward, everything on the island has collapsed entirely. Um, that concept, the low resolution aspect of it, a really talented cast, everything works together so incredibly well to make everything about this movie work. It's tense, it's scary, you have a human interest story, and it'll make you jump at times. It makes you feel for these characters. When when any of the characters die, it is a gut punch, and it's brutal. And this is an apocalypse where people don't have plot armor. There are real stakes here, and you don't know who's going to make it and who's not. Um, and you're right, it is episodic from the beginning, the faction, to Jim finding the other survivors. And you could break it up into chapters. Jim and the girl whose name escapes me finding the father and daughter and everything tragic that unfolds there, and seeing how people handle it differently than getting into this group of army guys who are holed up and how they are handling things in a pretty poor way, I might add. Uh, it's, it turns into such an engaging, terrifying story that it's one I have no issue putting myself in that situation. And it makes me feel real fear, real tension. And that's one thing this movie is so tense. Even though there's definitely segments of the movie that are a lot quieter. Those are tense as well, though. The scenes with Jim walking through London and it's just empty, it's deadly silent, is so eerie. And the silence and stillness of things that are not supposed to be silent and still adds so much to this movie. And the fact that they were able to pull off some of those shots of these urban areas being completely empty on the budget they did is amazing. Uh, I don't really think there's much about this movie that doesn't work extremely well. It's utterly a classic. And very few movies have completely taken my breath away when I first watched them, like 28 days later. And rarely do you realize at the time that you're seeing something that's like, this is going to change things. I believe we both knew at that point that this was definitely going to kick something off, and man, did it. Um, and we instantly knew there, and it still remained to this day. It's like we have a new one that's going to rank high on our on our list of personal horror movies, because it's a brilliant piece of cinema, and it's one you don't have to be a horror fan to appreciate how incredibly well done it is, how terrifying it is, the human story it tells. And I'd be remiss to not the score. The score adds so much to this movie. The technical expertise that went into this, including the decision to shoot it on mini DV to give it that gritty feel. It, and that's one thing I will say now that was each of these three movies we're going to talk about are very different from each other. Um, the next the two movies that followed after this, I don't think they should have been shot like that. I don't know if you could have captured lightning in a bottle like that twice. I don't think the plots really worked out well, but I can't imagine this movie looking more polished. I think it would have taken some away from it.
It is. It's that, and then the fact that to me, it's where it's most horrific is in its restraint, because it is a UK movie, and you know that they are notoriously inaccessible to the type of weaponry you would expect if this was 28 days later took place in Milwaukee. Where it's just like even all the way back in '78, where it's just like, oh, you just go to the gun store and strap up and you're good to go. Like, this isn't the case, and so you do get, you get a little bit. Like the first weapon is a bag full of Pepsi cans. Like that's, and of course she has a machete and the Molotov cocktails, and because they're not, zombies, you don't get that gory, feasting that you'd expect in that type of movie. And so, and you're not, up until toward the end, you're not getting the the headshots and the squibbing and all that stuff. And so, when little things like the Molotov cocktails, and you see the two infected running while on fire, like to me that is so much more impactful there. The scene at when they stop at the gas station and the little boy is in the store and you just see him coming out cleaning the baseball bat is so much more horrific than if you would have sat there and just really like Walking Dead watched it happen minute by minute. And then when you do get the military involvement and you do get the machine gun fire, it's so it's so out of pocket for what the movie has been, and it's so impactful. Like it really would be like if it's a very quiet place, and all of a sudden when there's just machine guns after machine gun ripping through people, like it makes it so much more haunting than it is, and say like again, like if this had been a more American type situation. It's just, and I think again that's watching it this time I could not get over the score and the placement of music. Both that main score, which they bring back for the sequels, that kind of melancholy theme, but then like the music that plays like this weird when they have the shopping montage. It's like this weird. It almost feels kind of like a fun modern like homage to like the music from Dawn, where it's like it's just this real like cool early 2000s music that kind of elevates like how happy we are in this moment, so that way when that drastically goes away, you're just left with just all your emotions like you're in your stomach. Also, for for the character. Not only are you waking up into a virus apocalypse, but you're like, hey man, dong's out for Oppenheimer to to wake up not only in a hospital room, not realizing what's going on, but realize your room is locked. There's nobody around, and you wake up just butt naked. Like that's talk about setting the horror off right. And then how much of that ties into weirdly watching it. You know that when you first pull out of the scenes at the beginning of the movie and you realize there's just a monkey strapped to a bed wired up to the cut to Jim, who's just a naked monkey strapped to a bed, wired up. It's really interesting. All the kind of the stuff I missed as not only as a 17-year-old, but having seen this movie several times since and on this rewatch, knowing that we were going to talk about it, really seeing all this amazing like filmmaking stuff happening in it that was really cool to pick up on.
There's so much to recommend it, and instead one of the most it's one of those watching it again. Just that the scenario is so relatable and so terrifying, and they make it. It doesn't seem very far fetched. It seems to be one of the more realistic scenarios they've thrown in one of these apocalyptic movies. Because I mean, they're infected people. You shoot them, they die. You light them on fire, they die. They're not They're not. They can't take an infinite amount of damage. Um, they don't eat, they die, which plays into this movie. Well, at least initially, that seems to change later on as they evolve. But it works, and I don't think there's much in the way to knock this movie. It's one I recommend highly to people. My watched it with my wife recently. She really enjoyed it. It's a movie I don't really hear much bad about. Um, I do remember someone once upon a time wishing it had more like zombie mayhem, but I, I don't think I think there's plenty of that to go around, and I think there's a lot of the stuff in between the infected attack mayhem really enhances and elevates it.
Yeah, I feel like that would again that because that this sets the stage for the movies that give you that. I mean, you do event down the line get that from it, but I feel like if that had been in this movie, it would have lost its impactfulness.
It would have.
Um, there is always, all these years later, still one lingering question, and I don't know if you can answer it, but I will impose it to you and to the chat. It's the only thing in this movie that I don't understand, and it is what is going on with that one soldier's haircut.
Yes, I'm going to be honest. I don't before my most recent watch in the last few weeks. I never noticed that. But his haircut looks like I I will throw out my theory as to what happened, and it's like patchy and weird. Um, I was in the army. Army guys, especially infantry guys, which these guys presumably are, mess with each other a lot. The pranks get wild and cruel. I'm guessing he was sleeping, fell asleep on guard duty, and they attacked him with a pair of spears. That's about all I can figure. Unless the guy's like, screw it, it's the apocalypse. Ran, ran, ran.
Yeah,
Uh, that's my theory. But it's like, very much, that wasn't accidental. They very much made him look like that. It's like, cool.
yeah.
Why?
I will say
I
also
will.
the just on that same topic of all this movie doesn't have the gut munching, it doesn't have the brain smashing. So when you get to a scene, and to me it's the most painful, like the most like I cannot watch it, and it's just dry shaving with a big razor.
Those single blade big razors are so terrible. When I was down in Oklahoma a few months ago, I borrowed one from my dad and I chopped my face up. Using that dry, man, that's one of those
And
relatable.
he's got good growth, so that was Oh,
Yeah, worse than getting ripped apart by infected people. Dry shaving with a single blade bic, man. It should be illegal.
all right. Let's see what you guys are talking about. First Fulci was the New York. Oh no!
Yeah, that's something. New York Ripper.
Oh, what a. I don't want to use the word terrible, but I mean that's not on my. Yeah, I'm trying to think of my first. Was it gay? Was it? What was our first? My first Fulci.
I I'd be willing to bet it was the Gates of Hell.
It has to be Gates of Hell. I think I remember later on seeing like Zombie somewhere. I'm honestly surprised you never owned Zombie. Like I feel like Zombie would have been like a DVD you owned.
Yes, I watched Zombie. I've seen House by the Cemetery. I'm going to be the first to tell you I'm not a big fan of Fulci. I think he's wildly overrated rated and kind of a hack. And if his family's being held hostage, he could not pace a movie to save his life. A
I
discussion for another day.
I do agree. Although I do, and it's probably more not so much the execution, but it's just the imagery of it. I do like the Beyond. But that's about it.
Um, yes, the New York Ripper. That I've not seen it. I am very familiar with it, and that is quite a trashy, nasty, bizarre introduction to Fulci. So
Yeah.
thanks for clearing that, Ben. Um, yeah, that I think wraps up my thoughts, feelings, on 28 days later, and I think we can move on to 28 weeks later from
Yeah.
2007.
It's weird that it took him 5 years to pump out a sequel, but then you think about all the stuff that came out between those two movies. I get, like I said, you get the Dawn of the Dead remake. You get was I kind of from the same area because they came out. I think they came out the same year, maybe. Uh, Another weird, like, amazing kind of English take on a horror movie with dog soldiers. Like you, um,
Yes.
and then of course again the Walking Dead comic comes out and zombies are suddenly quite literally in your face by the time we get to 2007. Romero, the Land of the Dead, you get that as well.
And Diary of the Dead. Woohoo.
Hey, I
I'm
will
gonna
take. I will take. We'll definitely dive into the Dead movies at some point. I would. I am a staunch defender of the idea of Diary. Not so much. I think the worst problem with doing Diary is he was too late to the found footage game, and they're not great characters.
no. Although Diary of the Dead is a masterpiece compared to Survival of the Dead.
That movie
And
is so bad.
I paid good money. I paid like $10 to rent that movie on demand. Anyway, with that, we're getting off on a tangent. So we pick up, 2000. This is released in. Looking at the release date, got a lot of tabs open. Released in the U.S. in 2007. Uh, I saw this in the theaters. I don't remember where I was. I don't remember if I watched it in Germany or the States, but of course I rushed to the theaters to see 28 weeks later, given how huge of a fan I've been of 28 Days Later. And what we got was a very different movie than 28 Days Later. I think it's for the best. I think if they had just done it in the same style and the same kind of thing, I don't know if they could have caught lightning in a bottle twice. What do you think?
No, I agree. I saw it in the theater, and then um, I remember owning it, but Like when I watched all three of these this week, and I remember coming to this one after watching the first one and being like, I haven't watched. I think I've only watched this like once. I don't. I wonder why. Um, Now having watched it again, I do have my reasons why. But yeah, it was. It could not have been the same movie. Not at all. Um, uh, I will give some notes here, and then I will let you break this one down before we dive into it. Directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, and then written by four different people with quite a who's who, or who was going to be who cast. Most of who are weirdly English playing Americans. Of course, Jeremy Renner, Rose Byrne, Robert Carlyle as everybody's Dad of the Year, um, Harold Perrineau,
Here, no.
Perrineau, and a young, even studlier Idris Elba.
Oh, and we got to say the two main kids.
Oh,
I thought my wife, Imogen Poots.
Imogen Poots, yeah.
Did you see the name of the who plays the boy? His
Uh-uh.
name is Macintosh Muggleton. I'm not kidding you. This kid's name is Macintosh Muggleton, which has to be one of the most British-sounding names I've ever. Muggleton, Macintosh Muggleton.
Like that's the name of a character where they explain where the slur Muggles comes from. Like that's such a Harry Potter name.
It is the most Harry Potter name ever for a person who has nothing to do with Harry Potter and is a real life person. So Imogen Poots and Macintosh Muggleton. Man, they picked two actors with some amazingly interesting names.
But I will say, despite her hilarious last name, she has gone on to be a fantastic actress. She's
Oh,
great in the Fright Night remake. And then her in Green Room is just fantastic. And that weird,
um,
she's even great in that weird Jesse Eisenberg. What's the name of that movie? Vivarium or
yes, Vivarium. She's also plays in the bizarre supernatural kind of take on Yellowstone sort of Outer Range. I don't know if you've seen that with Josh Brolin in it. It's an oddly engaging series. No, he's actually really good. Uh, Good old Macintosh Muggleton has not really gone on to do much, although I'll say I think he's pretty good in this movie. So, here we, at the beginning of 28 weeks later, we're given these blurbs about what has happened. UK was put under quarantine, and a few months after that, it was due to the infected starving to death, which we found out in the first one would eventually happen. The whole island was considered free of infection, so United States and presumably with help from other militaries decide to go back in, start to clean up, and start bringing British citizens back into the country. Um, Although we're shown that, but I've got to talk first about the tensest opening. I glossed right over one of the tensest openings to a movie, where Robert Carlyle's character Don, uh, it's during the initial infection, and this man and his wife are holed up with several other people in this cottage out in the countryside, while the infection rages outside. And this little boy comes banging on their door, and they decided to bring him in. Well, this little boy is being pursued by a horde of infected who proceed to attack the house and get inside and immediately start ripping people apart. Um, Robert Kyle, our character, leaves his wife behind which you watch it with your spouse, and she's like, "You better never do that to me. That's going to happen to you if you watch this movie with your spouse." Uh, and he manages to escape, leaving her behind, and manages to get on a small boat and get away. Narrowly, he's the only survivor of this group. Narrowly gets away on a boat down the river, being relentlessly pursued by the infected. It is a tense scene. There's some parts of it that'll make you jump. It's and it's pulse pounding and absolutely terrifying, and I love it. Whatever criticisms anybody may have of this movie, I think that opening scene is chef's kiss dynamite. We pick up 28. The the infection is presumably gone from the island of Britain, and the United States has gone in and cordoned off an area in London. They're bringing British citizens back in, and they're doing this 28 weeks after the initial infection. I want to throw this out there because I'm definitely far from the only one who pointed this out. Um, as far as naming conventions go, 28 weeks later sounds great. It follows up recently from 28 days later. I believe there's exactly zero chance that they would be introducing British citizens back to the island a little over 6 months after the infection hit. I think you would have cleanup crews, scientists, and military for years and years before they introduced anybody back in there. I digress. It's a movie. I'll try not to read too much into it because, yeah, the naming convention works. Anyway, so they're bringing. They have an area of the city fenced off and heavily guarded. They have Delta Force snipers who are positioned everywhere. But as far as I know, there's no one infected left on the in all of London or in all of Britain or any of the United Kingdom, however you want to quantify it. Well, Robert Carlyle's character Don has survived, and he's in this kind of green zone that the United States established, kind of doing some maintenance work and whatnot. He has the keys to the kingdom, so he's accessed all these areas, which comes into play later. And he is being reunited with his children. His children were apparently gone when the rage virus hit, so they're being brought back, and he's reunited with them and shares his version of what happened with he and his wife, their mother, which of course is not exactly the truth. The kids sneak out to go to their old house, and they find that dear old mom was not in fact ripped apart by the infected. He was attacked, but he doesn't turn into a feral ghoul. However, they find out a little too late he can still very much spread it. One person doing one really stupid thing manages to get infected and sparks off the whole thing again. And all of a sudden, this zone is being relentlessly attacked by the infected. Especially, I think this is probably the first appearance we see of an infected with higher brain function, who's not just feral, who can plan. Robert Carlyle's character seems to be a lot sharper and more aggressive and better at problem solving than the other infected we've seen from here on out. Given the fact that these children likely have some form of immunity to this virus, Rose Byrne's character, who's the doctor, decides she needs to get them out. Manages to link up with Jeremy Renner's character, who is the Delta Force sniper. They're trying to escape the city that is rapidly falling. The infected. And try to have some chance to get them out of there, while the military is cleansing the area using gunfire and carpet bombing and nerve gas. And a lot of the movie is them on the retreat trying to survive this horrifying ordeal, dodging both the American military and the infected. So, that's my not so brief synopsis on what's going on at 28 weeks later. What do you think?
So, again, essentially revisiting this since the first time I saw it, I do agree with you that opening is 100% Chef's Kiss. And I am glad that this movie doesn't try to do the first movie again. But I will say on this rewatch, I kind of discovered that I don't really enjoy this movie as much as I do. Not only as much as I do the first one, but I acted there was part of me that was kind of actively not enjoying major chunks of this movie, and I think it's because this this movie, while the first movie is so influential on what came after, this movie feels so much as if trying to be exactly what was happening movie wise. And also it also feels very, while you can look at that first movie and it's Alex Garland, so Alex Garland can be very surgical with what he's wanting to say, be it uh, uh, physiologically or politically or religiously. I mean, we saw that done very well with a movie like Civil War. He can also be very ham-handed with what he's trying to say, a la a movie like Men. But I feel like with 28 Days Later, he is very surgical and precise with what we're saying with some of the imagery in that film. And this movie feels so very of its time. The idea that you have, it also feels like that movie was made, you know, in England for an English audience that just kind of took the world by storm. This feels very much like, well, we got to make this for the Americans, because it's just weird that they're like they mentioned like, oh, there was a NATO group task force. It just so happens that they're all Americans.
Every last one of them.
Every last one of them. They're all played by English people, but they're all Americans. And so it's in 2007, so you are dealing with this imagery of like American occupied land elsewhere and kind of bustling them in and not necessarily being a welcoming force back to your homeland. And then to be like, the minute something goes wrong, they're just like, I'll kill them all. That's fine, I guess. And also, it definitely doesn't, to me, have. I don't want to say that all the characters are unlikable, but to me, you aren't given, because there are so many characters we're bouncing in through, back and forth, whether it's between Rose Byrne and the children, or you're bouncing between Jeremy Renner and the helicopter pilot and the other snipers, to the kids and their dad, the dad and the mom. There's so much moving around, moving parts, that the characters aren't given room to breathe. And so to me, you're not really connected to any of them. The only one you get any kind of connection with is the Robert Carlyle character, who despite on what you may or may not do in that situation, is clearly imposed even before he's turned to be kind of a like low life character. And then when he does become infected through kind of, I mean, it scientifically is accurate, kind of a goofy way. He then out of nowhere, because we haven't established this, out of nowhere, he's almost superhumanly. He feels more like a movie, like a character from a movie. Like, did you ever see The Sadness?
Yes.
Like that movie definitely pulls from his character to the nth degree. He feels more out. He feels, at what we've established as the infected, he feels out of place. And I feel like this movie also ditches the whole like infected versus zombie, because there are scenes where like there's a scene. I can't remember if it's when they're running in the field, or if it's where we have the helicopter scene. But there are zombies with just, um, there's like a zombie with like a huge chunk out of it, or infected with like he's missing part of his chest is like open. There's a zombie with his guts out, kind of still crawling. So we've ditched the whole like they're just humans with this virus. It feels like we've gone full tilt zombie without calling them zombies. Which is fine, but it kind of that's what made the first one so special is that they're not zombies, and this kind of I feel like leans into that because of how popular the zombie genre got after that movie. And while the other movie feels so much episodic, but you flow through each episode, this one feels more set piece to me. So like you have the opening, um, and then you kind of you're in forgettable like streets until we get to the park and the carousel in the middle of nowhere, and that feels like a scene like that feels like a Resident Evil scene.
Very much so.
Um, and then you have again just kind of boring street stuff until you get to the Wembley, the scene at Wembley, and then the ending shot, which we'll get to. This movie it just feels more like we're just setting up these like almost like video game levels, as opposed to kind of taking you on this journey. And again, there are not really characters that you necessarily are connected to or care about outside of just like, well, he's a good guy. She seems like a good girl. Oh, this one on this rewatch, again because I hadn't seen it so long, I just assumed it was right up there with the first one. And while I am appreciative that it's different, this did not do it for me this time.
It is very much not the first one. All three of these movies seem very distinctly different from each other, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Huh.
I'll agree that this is very much of its time in the mid 2000s. Um, I do think that the infected in this movie still are distinct from zombies. Yes, they do. It does show them having taken a lot of harm and still going a little bit, but presumably the rage virus pumps them full of adrenaline, and you can have massive bodily harm and still keep on going on for a little while. And I think the scenes where it shows them, there's one scene where it really shows them having been heavily damaged, is still kind of walking around with the Resident Evil like copper scene,
Mm-hmm.
which it's gruesome in kind of a weird, fun way. It does not really feel like it belongs in this movie. Of him using the uh, helicopter like a lawnmower and cutting through them, and just throwing gore everywhere. Kind of cool, but it just doesn't really seem to fit in there. But it's it's not as impactful as the first. There's just no way it was going to be. The first one was a tough act to follow, and what we got here is a lot more action-packed, polished movie. With very on-the-nose commentary about the United States military, and it's like, oh, we messed this up entirely. Let's blow stuff up. Accurate, let me tell you. Um, but how poorly the American military handled this operation actually strikes me as pretty realistic. If it gets out of, they didn't do a good job handling it in the first place, and the situation continues to absolutely disintegrate. So they just keep on making it like we don't know what we're doing, and the plans they had in place to deal with this weren't really well thought out to begin with, and they just keep having to adapt, and just things keep getting worse. Like the scene where infected get into the people that are contained, then the people get out, and there's infected intermixed in with the people, so they all have these snipers, and they're trying to take out the infected, and that's just it's like playing whack-a-mole at 10x speed. They just can't do it, so they just start killing everybody. That I think that's a pretty powerful scene, and I think that scene is grim. Jeremy Renner has a very difficult, I think he plays one of the more emotionally complex people in in this movie, where he's trying to trying to do the right thing in the face of this terrible situation, and the fact that he knows it's like there's some very high stakes here. But he's still trying to do some good out of it and help rescue these kids. So he's one of the probably the more heroic characters in the movie, even though you can definitely question whether or not what he did was the right thing given the circumstance. And I think we have some pretty good. I think the sniper scene, and the scene of the crowd, the people in the room being infected in real time, was a damn good scene. Some of their retreat from the infected. There's a scene involving the gas in the car that I really like that scene. It's terrifying as you see the guys in chem gear walking through the gas with the flamethrower, and it's like, oh, this is going to go really bad. It falls well short of the first movie. But for me, I'll be honest, I still think it's a pretty solid movie. This movie gets a lot of criticism just because it just there's no way it could properly follow up 28 days later. And I agree, it's very much of the time. It's not a terribly distinct movie. But I think in showing how terrifying the rage virus is, how quickly it can spread and how terrifying would it be to be caught in the middle of this. I'm not only trying not to get infected, but trying not to die as the military is desperately trying to stop the infection. I think this movie works fairly well.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is this movie when you think about that, you think about the first movie, like that whole movie plays in your head. And in this movie, it feels like there are scenes that are great. The opening scene, the scene, as goofy as it is, the scene with the helicopter is like that. You remember that.
Yeah.
The scene, the scene in the streets with the gas stuff. You remember that. Again, that ending where that kind of comes out of nowhere, but to me, it's so much. The thing that makes or breaks zombie movies for me is the characters. And while I won't say all the characters are unlikable, they are kind of ultimately let down by just kind of like for spoilers for this movie, I guess. Jeremy Renner is kind of given this heroic moment, and then it just kind of goes away. Rose Byrne is just weirdly killed off screen. And then you have the face down with Robert Carlyle because he's been set up as this big super genius monster, almost boogeyman, and that is kind of underwhelming. You have them escape with the helicopter pilot, only to then see the infected running in with the Eiffel Tower in the background. It feels, I don't know, like I was sitting here watching this and going like, okay, I don't hate it, but I'm not enjoying it. And then my brain starts to go, well, you know what is this movie, but way more enjoyable? Is something like Wreck or even Quarantine.
Cloverfield.
Yeah, even those movies, at least with I never saw the sequel to Quarantine, but at least with the Wreck movies, they had the same problem. That first movie was clear they are infected people, and then over time they just become zombies. But the big one for me was another English movie, Doomsday. Like I feel like Doomsday is kind of this movie, but kind of more fun. And you don't have the. I don't want to call it the albatross of that first movie around its neck, but again, this movie feels very of its time, and then also while that first movie clearly, whether on purpose or not, set the stage for what the genre would become, this definitely feels like a very safe, well, we just kind of want to be in the middle of that genre and not really kind
Get
of
that. And
push it.
I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying too.
Let's see what is going on. Welcome, Logan. You're okay.
I got to break off for a second.
Absolutely. I will jump here into chat before we break into this third one. Yeah. So yeah, I'm like I said, I'm really shocked that. Which part would you like me to read out loud? Um, 28 centimeters later. I like that. Yes. Oh, don't worry. We will get into that when we get into the third movie, Logan. We'll definitely touch on that subject. Um, yeah, because again, like one and two, to me, because I hadn't seen the second one, they were just kind of like neck and neck for me, and so it was really, really weird sitting here watching them, not back to back, but one night, one the next night, and being like, oh, okay, so I think I know why I haven't revisited this movie because I don't think I really enjoy it. I do like the idea of the notion of like the although it's kind of dumb when you like look at it the cold light of day of like, well, their eyes change color when they're infected, so if they have a weird like eye astigmatism, that'll keep the infection at bay. Like that's weird. And I honestly I didn't look up to see what else this director had directed. But again, it also feels very disjointed, probably because you have four or five screenwriters as opposed to just the one. Um, but I do need to look up and see what the guy directed. But we will here, and we're gonna do this a little differently, so you guys are getting a little bit of the behind the scenes. We are going to review 28 years later and break it down. We'll probably do a pretty general review, and then after we're kind of getting to spoilers because there's definitely some things in the movie we need to discuss that we cannot do so. We cannot break down without getting into to spoilers, and so just know that I'll give you a fair warning when we do get into more spoilery things. But we'll actually kind of cut it out of the set here. Although I don't know how. But let me see. Tell me how long we've been. Nope. Oh yeah, it does.
Well, shell, huh? Okay.
120 minutes. Okay. So I wanted to write down the time so I'll be able to comp it out. So here we are, 2025. Not quite 28 years later, barring that the first movie took place in 2000. The first movie took place in 2002. So I guess technically the movie takes place in 2030. So they're about a 5-year jump ahead of us, which, how things are going now, could turn out to be wildly prophetic. So, but yes, 28 years later, the return of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland to come back to this this franchise and bring us a now third entry and setting up what I guess is going to be a fourth entry as well. It's supposed to come out next year.
Either later this year or next year.
Which I mean, it was something to hear, but I do appreciate them not being like, and now it's a new trilogy. But yeah, 28 years later. So, uh, we'll just break down. So I've got some cast here. Aaron Taylor Johnson, kick ass himself. Uh,
Or better known as Craven the Hunter,
oh,
the Academy
yes.
Award winning 2024 film Craven the Hunter.
Hey, we have to be cool because he may or may not be the next James Bond. At least in this movie, he gets to use his own accent. That's kind of cool. Jodie Comer, who, regardless of how you feel on this movie, whether it's this movie or that Tom Hardy motorcycle movie, tells you that she's going to give you 110%. Ray Fiennes coming out of left field and literally out of left field, and then Jack O'Connell, who's having quite the year as also the main vampire in Sinners. Is in this
Oh
movie toward
yeah.
the end that we will talk about. So, do you wanna start kind of the base of this one, or do you wanna?
Well, I'll delve into it a bit. Hey, so here we are in Scotland. The movie starts off with something kind of confusing with a bunch of children watching the Teletubbies, and then bam, the house is being overran by the infected. A little boy runs to the church and to the safety of a church with the priest, and the priest is like, yes, it's the end times, and really happy about getting torn to pieces by the infected. And this little boy manages to get away, and we're like, okay, wonder where that's going to fit in later. You don't find out too much later. So 28 years after the initial infection, we are shown some information on a screen crawl about the entire about what the events of 28 days later, 28 weeks later, and after things completely fell apart in 28 weeks later, they said, "Screw it, we're cutting the island off. It's going into quarantine forever." But they have a naval blockade surrounding the entirety of the United Kingdom. Make sure no one can get in or out. If anybody steps foot on that island, they are stuck there forever. Well, that has left a lot of people stranded there. But in the years since, they have managed to rebuild civilization in some of these secure villages, and we're following the story of these people, a few characters from one village, which lives out on this little island that is connected by this little causeway that is accessible for a few hours out of the day at low tide. Um, and you get to see the inner workings of their how their little society works. And you have some great world building there. Then you get to see Aaron Taylor Johnson's character and his son's name being Spike, who's really the main character of this movie, as they go on a mission to the mainland to try to Spike his first infected kill. Because yes, in the original 28 Days Later, said, "Oh, the infected will starve to death." Well, life finds a way. By Jurassic Park, uh, infected decades later are still very much around. You have a few different types of infected. You have the low slows, which are overweight infected who kind of slowly crawl across the ground eating bugs and whatever else they can scrounge up. They are something of a threat, but not so much of a threat because they are, well, so slow. You have the standard infected who run around mostly naked, screaming in packs, and are very feral and not terribly intelligent. And you have the very dangerous variant called the alphas, which my theory is that's kind of what was going on with Robert Carlyle's character in 28 Weeks Later. Just a guess, I have no idea. The alphas are much smarter than the normal infected, and they organize the lesser infected. And not only that, They are huge. They kind of, one of the characters states that apparently whatever the effect a virus has on them, it's like pumping them full of steroids. They get bigger, stronger, smarter, and faster. And they're running around naked like the rest of the infected. And you've heard anything about this movie online, you've undoubtedly heard about the Alpha's dingling as he runs around with it flopping in the wind, and I can't lie, it's kind of funny. But they are very terrifying in the way they can come after you on a dead sprint of this hulking infected trying to catch you, and they can organize the others to pursue you. And the image of these infected, they're scrawny, they're scraggly, they're dirty, coming after you in droves, screaming, is done in a very terrifying manner. You get to you see this little boy kind of coming of age with his father and some of the things that are going on back in the village, and him trying to understand what's going on. One of the key plot points being that his mother is sick. Well, given they're living a very primitive life, they have no doctors around, and they don't know what's going on with her. She's having cognitive issues and just very ill. So this little boy hears tale of a doctor that has supposedly gone insane that lives somewhere nearby. So he's hoping maybe he can enlist this doctor's help to get some help for his mother to kind of figure out what's going on. That's all I'll say, kind of the synopsis of the plot without giving away too much. Take it away, Jason. What you got to say?
So I watched this movie quite literally this afternoon, and I do feel like we, for years with that first movie, and even to agree with the second movie, it was always like, excuse me, those aren't zombie movies. They're rage infected. There's a difference. I feel like we've left that behind, even to the point to where the word zombie is used in this film. This one definitely feels the most video gamey out of them, and I mean that. I don't mean that as an insult, but I mean when we're introducing like different classes of villains, including a boss villain. It's hard not to think of like, I should go back and play some of the Resident Evil movies or games. Although someday we will have to bite the bullet, the umbrella coated bullet, and talk about the film series of the Resident Evil movies.
It's coming.
I do like that. Despite clearly, and I said it to you off stream. If I don't want to have the rage virus, but as a male, if you're gonna get it, we all want to be an alpha. I mean, clearly I'm a slow low or whatever the fuck they call it. But we all want to be the alpha because just a giant Goliath of a man running around with a apple at the end of a baby arm, like it's a real Dr. Manhattan in your face. Dicks out for Craven type situation. I will say this, as the movie goes, I can see, without getting the spoilers, why it is divisive with audiences. Having watched all these now fairly back to back, I feel like it does a good job, especially bringing back the original filmmakers. The one thing I hate is if they'd have been like, "Oh, that second movie never," even though I'm not a fan of that movie, never happened. I do like we are telling a new story, an evolving story in that world. Watching this almost feels like if I was to tell you that this wasn't an original piece, if and it wasn't called 28 Years Later, um, if I was like, hey, there's this book I read. It's a really good like coming of age horror book called The Bone Temple, and it's about this boy trying to go out into the post apocalypse to save his dying mother. It feels this. It feels like this is what that like. This is the adaptation of that more so than
Yes.
it does an adaptation or a sequel to 28 Days Later. And I think that more than anything is what is, I won't say upsetting fans of this franchise, but I feel like it this is so clearly not a sequel film. This is just a kind of, we're coming back to this world to tell a story 28 years after the fact, or technically 23 years after the fact of the first movie we made. Um, I think all the acting is fantastic, and I will say the one part about the filmmaking, and I love that they all shot them on like iPhones, because it does give it a look that isn't a copy of the original mini DV, but it does give it just a little bit of like this weird, because we spend so much time on our phones watching whether it's YouTube videos or TikToks, they're all shot on your iPhone, so it does give it a real like familiar feel shooting it that way. Although my one biggest complaint, and it's not a spoiler, is the editing around like the kills. Like when it cuts to the weird like video game angle of like you get like arrow cam. And I'll get into more specifics here in a bit, but that's just kind of my brief takeaway is that I think it's a very interesting movie. I think it's a really good movie. I think the fact that it is kind of almost in name only tied to this franchise, I think has kind of chained it down to more than what the potential it really shows.
It really changes things up from anything in the first two movies, especially from 28 Days Later. It doesn't, the things that, the kind of the rules that were established 20 Days Later are not followed here. There's some similarities with other rage virus, how they act and how it's transmitted. Um, but it doesn't, given how feral and single-minded the rage infected are, it doesn't make sense that a lot of them would have survived as long as this, especially in the numbers, because they go out on the mainland, and there are so many infected, both the Lolos and the infected, and they even run into a few different alphas, at least two that I remember. It's like they're fairly common, and the idea of infected evolving over time isn't a novel idea. We've seen it a lot. We saw in Land of the Dead, among others, of them you having new classifications emerge and them evolve. But it feels so different from the first one. I agree. It's like it's its own thing, which is kind of a light of which you can view it in, and it has some kind of maybe like a soft reboot of this franchise. Uh, Even though that's never stated that that's actually the case. Although I would say this, otherwise it's going to be real tough to pick up this series 28 years afterwards, unless you went through and did it where you have somehow in a populated area the rage virus gets loose again. No rage virus, they're in, I don't know, they're in Russia, they're in Zambia, they're in LA, and the rage virus gets loose. That being the case, we're getting kind of the same movie again. So doing it this way, you do get to see something different, which keeps in keeping with the it's distinctly different. Each movie being distinctly different from the other, from the ones that came before or after it. Um, I love good world building in a movie, and I think this movie does excellent world building of showing how the society functions, the rules of this world we're in, how various people are react and respond to the things that are going on. Like Spike, him not he's 12, so this is the only world he's ever known. They run into a Swedish soldier later on in the movie. Um, let's say my group of soldiers was the least one of the most incompetent group of soldiers I've ever seen in my life. Yes. Um, and this guy, this soldier shows him an iPhone. He has no idea what it is. It's just like, why would he? And guys ask him about the internet, and like has no idea what the internet is. Why would he? They live in a very primitive kind of civilization at this point. And they're using. No, you mentioned during 28 Days Later, it's like they're in the UK, so they don't have guns every which way like we do in the United States, which I don't think the rage virus would be able to spread nearly as well here. But we're America, we got guns. Um, so they're using, bows and arrows and crossbows and whatnot, which the idea of having to fight these feral ghouls with a bow and arrow is terrifying, but it leads to some really cool moments. As these folks are absolutely Legolas lethal. Their bows and arrows. They practice ad nauseum and they know exactly where to hit them to put them down immediately. Uh, Sidebar here: whenever you're trying to stop a human being, infected or otherwise, that's trying to attack you, it has been known that reliably to put them down, you have to hit something in their central nervous system. You can damage people, and yes, it may eventually stop them, eventually, but not before they mess you up. These people have learned that you need to hit them somewhere in their spinal cord or their brain in order to put them down, and that is a nice, realistic touch I really like. Uh, and there's a lot of touches in this movie I really liked. A lot of the that I think the world building they did just a phenomenal job. I agree though; it just doesn't really seem. It seems very. It's like it's not in the same universe as 28 Days Later. Um, and there's some things here and there. The pregnant infected woman. A lot of the things just it doesn't. Also, the fact that all these infected, of which there are so many of them, running around naked and not freezing to death in the UK. I think it's real cold and wet there, man.
So that, yeah, I agree with, like, weather-wise it's dumb, but I do like that touch. It's interesting because of the idea of, like, okay, these people, it's 28 years later. If they're not dying off, then it's the same people. They've just been running around the woods, getting into God knows what for the last 20 years, and all their clothes have just kind of rotted away. Um, and so you are all left with all these weird, just emaciated, skeletal creatures, at this point. They do give a little bit, again, like I said, they don't, while we are throwing the Z word around, and there are definitely more of, like, in the first movie and to some parts in the second one, but lesser so, is it's more of like they're constantly vomiting blood. And so that's how they infect you, because it's their blood saliva. Whereas in this movie, heavily, it's all on biting. Like, we're biting and stuff. You do get that there is still weirdly a lot of like wildlife, um, especially where they are. Because I do like that it takes place in the Scottish Highlands. Like, we're out of the big cities because you can't survive there. The novelty of holding up in a mall is in nowadays, dumb. Like, you're just in a populated area. Um, but Um, like you said, the world building and stuff, and just so much of the imagery in this movie, whether it's the horrific parts, like the at the beginning with the a blood-soaked television playing the Teletubbies, to the zombies coming through the stained glass of that church, while the priest is like almost rapturously orgasmic about it. Um, while the army, I will say that the stuff with the Swedes is really kind of dumb, and it feels like it's like it almost felt like if it was put there and then they like took their guns and then had guns, it would make sense, but they don't, and so it's just like, well, we need we need to do something with guns in this movie. Let's bring in these soldiers, and we'll bring them for a stupid reason, only so that we can like have the audience wink at this out at the outside world, them not knowing what the outside world is like. Because they have that, he's like, here, this is my fiance, and he's like, she's ugly.
Like, what's wrong with your face?
Yeah, why is your face so gross? Um, to all of them, just the scene is cool while they're down in like the little tunnel thing. Um, until they're all like the alphas, aka like infected predators. Um, by the way they act and the way they kill. Um, I love the stuff with Ray Fiennes, because when you hear about his character in your head, you're like, oh, like God, what is this gonna be like? Because he's Voldemort, man. You're like, what is this gonna be like when he goes, and you end up seeing what he's been building based on what Aaron Taylor Johnson's character has told his son. You, as crazy as it is, it's weirdly beautiful, and they have that scene together, a couple of scenes together. Talking about was it Memento Morte, and almost a way of. And it's one of the themes I will get into in spoilers. But just that scene where the fire starts going through the man-made trees, if you will, the temple he's built. That it's just beautiful, beautiful filmmaking. But
Stone temple.
yeah, again, it's just if you would have been like, dude, they're just, I read this book and they're turning it into a movie. You should totally read this book. And then like this was the movie, I'd be like, what a great adaptation of that book. But for it to be like, especially for the trailers, to be like, this is 28 years later. You love that movie? Well, then get a fucking load of this. And then to watch it and be like, well, these aren't tied together outside of the name at all.
Um, Even though it was very different, I did enjoy this movie. Um, Although it's like I think it's quite good at falling short of great.
Yeah.
But there's an elephant in the room we need to talk about, and it's not the alpha penis.
No. Well done. Uh, Logan in the chat would be very proud of you for that one. Um, yeah. So we're gonna get into the ending of the movie. It clearly, I don't know if to say it's a spoiler as much. I guess supposedly it's setting up the next movie. Um, so I won't necessarily give the spoiler warning now. Just know that we are going to be talking about the end of the film.
Yeah.
And that is the Jimmies. So, what was your thought sitting in the theater?
So we have this movie which is pretty somber throughout, and we have Mike after the events of it setting out on his own. on the mainland to look for answers. He's cooking a fish and runs afoul of the infected, and he's retreating. And it's like I thought right there of him being on his own and kind of setting up his next adventure. I think that would have been a great spot to cut it off because I knew there was a sequel coming, and that would have left it open for a sequel. And then he runs into a bunch of track-suited ninjas wearing blonde wigs, the Jimmies, which connects with their leader, was the kid at the beginning of the movie, who is watching the Teletubbies, then gets chased into the church. Same guy. He's now part of a gang called the Jimmies. And then they show up, they kind of help him out, and they start flipping around and doing these wild kung fu 60s Shaw Brothers style attacks and kill a bunch of the infected, all wearing tracksuits and blonde wigs. I wanted to throw shit at the screen. What? That has to be maybe the most jarring ending I have ever seen. It's up there, if not the most jarring scene. It is so out of place. It's like, let's watch the myth. The myth happens, the ending happens, and then it starts playing Wackety Sax or something. You're like, wait, what? It's... Get this out of the way. Yes, it's a direct reference to Jimmy Savile, the notorious British predator. I'm interested to see how they will kind of connect that and put that in. That's blatantly what they're going off of. He's a blonde dude, or tracksuit, also a horrible human being. Yeah, what did you think?
Okay, so I watched the movie this afternoon. I did not know the context, but I know people were talking about. They're saying the ending is so weird, and then without going into it, they were like they're referencing this particular person, and so I'm like, who is this person? So I got up this morning. I was like, I want to find out because the name sounds familiar. And so, watching 3 horror movies this week, I can safely tell you the scariest thing I watched is the 2-part documentary on Netflix called Jimmy Savile, A British Horror Story. Because holy shit, what this monster got away with for 60 plus years in the public eye is it's insane. Like it's one of those documentaries where you watch it and you're not just you are like engrossed in like the things that true crime docs hook you with, but you are just once the ball drops of what has been taking place through this timeline, you're just instantly so angry at the world because it was allowed to go unchecked. So yes, that definitely is the look they're going for. I also read not so much that, but so here's kind of where I was gonna get into part of what I I feel like something that the movie is going for, and this is my interpretation of it based on a little bit of the research I did watching that documentary, and then kind of knowing when I say knowing, but being a fan of and following Alex Garland's work, it feels like the movie is really digging into 3 very distinct viewpoints of, for me anyway, is religion. Where you have the group, and their religion is not so much like a divine a classic, mono or polytheistic religion. It's their religion is it's the group. It's the group at the fire. There's all these scenes where you see when you see Aaron Taylor Johnson and Spike going across, and you're seeing images of like the children being trained on how to shoot bows and arrows. They're the all the different jobs that you will eventually fall into one of these categories for the group. Um, the use of the imagery of like the the knights, the archers, and the knights in battle protecting the castle. Um, of course they use that very very powerful telling of that Boots poem from either World War One or World War Two. They're using all this. It very much feels like at 28 years after the fall of man, this particular group, like their religion is it's community, it's their people. And then you get to a character like Ray Fiennes' character, who I isn't necessarily like again something that kind of is akin to the movie I watched and did a review on. Is this idolatry of a human's idolatry of death and our dead ones. He builds this immaculate temple to out of the dead and to immortalize they're immortalized forever because their bones are here and have been used to create something, and very almost not quite a nature type thing. And then you get to the Jimmies, and you start looking at the time they're watching Teletubbies. There's a scene where the boy has the Power Ranger toy. At the time of when this took place, the real life Jimmy would have still been a fixture of children's television. And so they've built everything kind of around this weird religion that is kind of the big thing now here in the real world, is the religion of pop culture. And if you were 7 years old, 8 years old, and the world ends, and so that is your last piece of humanity, is whatever as a kid you were watching, and then you're forever stunted with that. And you're somebody who like this. I'm assuming this character is going to be leading into the sequel of almost a cult leader type. Besides the obvious, like we're hanging people upside down and feeding them to the infected and the upside down cross and all that. Surely, I don't think they're going to bring Satanism into the film, but just this idea, thinking of you and I, at 7 or 8 years old, if our last interaction with the world was the TV shows we were watching at 7 or 8 years old, that would kind of be that would be your personality. And so like I can't imagine, and growing up that's all you had as far as memories go because you're so young. And so I feel like that's kind of what they're saying with the idea of, they're doing the flips because that's what the Power Rangers did that. And so that's what you do. They're color coordinated. Not only with that scene where they're doing the flips and stuff, but the song that plays, it's like this weird, like, black metal version of the Teletubby theme. And so you have that going on. If you're a kid, imagine it's 1988 and the world ends, but you're a kid who loved TV. Maybe you start a cult and you're all wearing Cosby sweaters. Like, you don't know any better. I don't know. To me, that's kind of what the movie is going for. That's why I read them, and so I am more curious now. If we go into this next movie and they're just nameless, like they just did it for the shock value of, hey, the English will get this and it'll really fuck them up, but the Americans won't know what is happening. If it's done solely as that, then that's going to be the conversation of like, well, then that was stupid and dumb,
Yeah.
and really like, what were you thinking? But just on the little bit of research, just on kind of how I interpreted that based off of the things I've watched recently, and then just kind of how I was feeling that the way it's kind of played out that way. I feel like this is what it's saying, but again, it could just be Jason's weird. He's I get into the A24 stuff.
Watching too much A24.
I know I'm so pretentious. I will say though, watching, and this is just completely off topic, and then we'll get back into it. Is if you love 28 Days Later, which why wouldn't you? And you want to see kind of a real, like not connected at all, but a real like spiritual sequel to that movie that dives into the same themes and honestly is pretty just as dour. It Comes at Night is a great. It's not going to be a good night, like mentally, but it's a great spiritual sequel to 28 Days Later.
Might be something to your take on it and kind of breaking it down like that. Um, I think there's a good possibility they might do something truly good and interesting with it. Uh, and I know with the being left with that, having the world fall apart when you're 8 to 10, and your lasting memory of pop culture being those the children's shows, cartoons, whatever media you watch. I could definitely see that. Um, I think that would have been good had they thrown that in the next movie, not hit you in the face with a pie at the end of
For
28
sure.
years later. It I think it was a as an interesting choice for me. It didn't work, and it kind of unfortunately left a bad taste in my mouth for otherwise a pretty decent movie. Even though I would say there's a lot more plot holes in this one than any of the other movies. The ones that kind of nagged at me and bothered me, like walking through the woods with a newborn baby. It's like we'll ring a dinner bell for every infected in the air. There's various things come up. It's like, okay, that doesn't really make much sense. Um, but that I'm trying not to turn into my dad who has to nitpick every little thing in every movie ever. A lot of it I could have good suspension of disbelief here. It just there seemed to be a lot of it. There was that, and kind of the stark differences from Rules to Salvage 28 Days Later and that ending. I'm left. I think this is a good movie, not a great one in my
Yeah.
opinion. Uh, I'll definitely go watch the next one, which I've heard is called The Bone Temple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think they could do some very interesting things moving forward. I'd say this is worth watching, especially if you liked either one of the ones before it. Uh, just go in with reasonable expectations and knowing that it's gonna it takes some creative liberties.
Yeah, yeah, definitely go into it knowing that it's really out. Like the only thing that ties it is that it's the British Isles and there's a virus. Like that's outside of that, it
Yes.
really does not tie. Um, they should have called it Large Zombie Dong. They probably could have gotten some more butts in seats. No, I agree with the ending. Like it has such a beautiful ending, and then I feel like you put that in to set up the next movie, and I get it, but it also, and especially in like a post Marvel world, that could have easily been a post credit setup. Instead, you're kind of
Yes.
left with this weird fart of an ending. It's kind of like the ending. And I'm not comparing them movie wise at all, but just what I thought of while you were just talking about it is the ending between the Matrix Reloaded and the Matrix Revolutions, where it ends on the and you're just like, who the fuck is that guy? Credits, and you're like, wait, what?
Sometimes people take a big swing at the ending. Sometimes it works. A lot of times it doesn't.
I do want to address, and I'll address you directly into the comments right now, Logan. I'm gonna tell you, you know why you didn't like It Comes at Night, and it's the same reason almost everybody else didn't either. It's because those trailers did not sell you the movie they made. That if you do go back, go revisit it, knowing that it is not what those trailers promised, I think you'll enjoy it as a good disease, like dealing with how you make hard choices in a post-pandemic world. Um, but yeah, the trailers totally f that movie up because those trailers sold you as like monster of the woods coming to get you movie, and it is not that. It is completely a human story of how to and how not to deal with uh, dealing with a world in disease and how humanity can be lost in the process. Not just humanity, but your own like morality. Humanity can be lost after humanity is gone. So that's your homework. Go revisit that movie, knowing that the trailers are dumb, and I think you'll enjoy it more.
Well, I really enjoyed visiting 28 days later and 28 weeks later. Even with my issues, I did enjoy going to see 28 years later. It was, I'm not gonna, it's like, this year has not been a year where movies really knocked my socks off. So I'll be interested to see what I can dig up for our best and worst of 2025 in the spring when we do that. Um, yeah, I will say though, it's brought up a lot of positive memories, and it said remembering that those times back in 2002 and 2003, um, which make up so many core memories of from our younger life, and just no matter what, I'm happy that all these years later we're still here, we're still talking about it, and that I get much sentimental, but man, what a that just warms my heart, and I think it's awesome that we're here. You would have told me when we walked out of that movie 22 years ago that we'd still be talking about it with other people 22 years later. That would make me very happy indeed. So
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it's interesting. Said three very different movies and three very different takes on the rage virus.
yeah,
And we'll see what the next ones are like. I'm sure we'll review the Bone Temple when it comes out, and any that might come out afterwards. We'll have to see.
yeah. I'm going to be very curious because again, it's a weird thing where like I don't think they've set it up, but I don't think Danny Boyle and Garland are back for the sequel, so that makes me nervous. Um, but oh, um, well done. I don't. I don't know if we'll get another one of those. I don't think we'll get another. I honestly don't know that we need another Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Edgar Wright movie. I feel like that trilogy is so perfect that you don't really need. But no, I enjoyed. It's again, I love that we finally got to talk about 28 Days Later. It is weird that to do so we have to talk about this really bizarre franchise that is less franchise and more loosely stringed together movies. But um, yeah, they all have something very different to bring to this genre, and it is interesting the things that again for me it's horror in general is the topics the subtext you can cover in a in a goofy monster movie. Um, and despite maybe not enjoying some as much as others, I feel like all three of those movies do a very good job of displaying the best of that. That you can really get in and say something uh, somewhat prolific in a movie about naked giant dog monsters running around chasing kids with bows and arrows. I will highly recommend. I will stand behind Midnight Meat Train as a great underrated movie. And honestly, hot take, it may be the best adaptation of a Clive Barker story. Shh, I won't say it too loud, but I think it might be.
All right, White Hellraiser. I'll stick to that. Whatever.
Oh,
No, though I do agree. Midnight Meat Train, and I'm a die-hard apologist for the movie Rawhead Rex. So
oh, don't I do have Rawhead Rex on the timeline. I don't remember. Oh, I think it's for next Halloween. I think it's next Halloween. I had planned to do a Clive Barker. We'll do Clive Barker and dive into.
I do none of that.
But yeah, so that's kind of unless the next movie comes out 28 days from now. That's gonna wrap it up for the 28 days later reverse. Um, that's the other thing too. I'm glad people were so upset that Cillian Murphy wasn't back in this movie, even though that weird zombie kind of looked like super skinny Cillian Murphy. I know there's talk about him possibly coming back. I don't want that. I like the fact that
Nope.
they're all very different.
No.
Um, but we will be back next month. And again, make sure that you are here. Make sure that you have put your underwear on outside of your pants because we are going to be reviewing the brand new iteration of Superman as well as ranking our own personal rankings of the Superman live action movies. Just so you know, we are excluding uh, Batman v Superman and Justice League because they're team movies. Or so solo Superman live action films we're going to be ranking. So if you want to hear my hot takes on perhaps Superman 4 or Man of Steel, you're not going to want to miss. You're not going to want to miss that. And we get to review the brand new one. And then go on. Yes.
Finish your thought real quick.
Well, I was just going to, and then I was going to lead that into our weekly reviews over at YouTube at our YouTube channel. This week, again, tomorrow I will be I want to clip out and put up our 28 years later review. Next week, I've got that review shot. I finally got to see and talk about the new David Cronenberg movie, The Shrouds. So it was quite a week in film watching. So that review will be up next week. I do unapologetically want to go see Megan 2.0 because I weirdly loved the first one. And the fact that this looks like the Terminator 2 of Megan movies, I am 100% down on. I just saw you just lost audio. Nope. No audio. At least it waited till the end. So, all right. With that, and with Nick nodding silently in agreement, we will tell you guys, make sure you follow us here at Twitch, over at our YouTube channel. Make sure we can get those shared because we're so close. We're 9 people. Just 9 people away from being able to dual stream on YouTube as well. So if you want to see us on either platform, make sure we're getting that done. And then again, join us next week for next month, I should say, for Superman. And until then, as Silent Bob here nods in agreement, we will see you guys next time. Bye.